Woo, the Golden Stallion, the man of tomorrow, Savzu, the rated R radio star, here for a little Wednesday Q&A, of course, only for the patrons. Thank you so much for being a patron. Had some people up their donations recently. Thank you so much for that, or their patronage. I don't know if you necessarily want to call it a donation. You definitely get something out of it. But anyway, wow, what a ride it's been the past few days. Of course, seeing the new Star Wars, going to a WWE pay-per-view, which I haven't been to one in a good long while. All of that, just tremendous times. If you haven't listened to the Patreon content, where both Stephanie and I have reviewed both of those events, and of course, in episode 256 of Sovereign Tech, I did a major review. I spent like an hour. Actually, I ended up spending like an hour and 20 minutes reviewing The Last Jedi. I will have a Star Wars update coming up. It might actually come out this week, where I'll be covering a lot of, I'll be going over some more of The Last Jedi, kind of in the aftermath and all this, but we'll be spending a lot of time talking about some other exciting stuff, because things within Star Wars in the broader canon have kind of, I don't know, I found myself enjoying some of it a little bit more as late, but anyway, we'll save that for the Star Wars update. In fact, frankly, just quick, maybe the reason I'm enjoying some of the tie-in material, like the comic books, like Dr. Aphra and Poe Dameron, is because maybe Lucasfilm, they seem to make clear, they don't give a rat's ass about the tie-in material really as much as they claim otherwise, and so they're letting the guys kind of do what they want, because woo, shit gets hot. I was amazed. That new Dr. Aphra comic, just came out this morning. I was reading it. Anyway, of course, this is getting recorded on December 20th, 2017. But I say let's start getting into some questions. I do want to just announce quick that we will be doing our monthly live Q&A. It's gonna end up being on Friday the 29th. That's when we're going to end up doing that. That schedule might change. It might end up being Thursday the 28th, but right now I'm planning on Friday the 29th. So something to keep in mind. Because, that Sunday is going to be New Year's Eve. I don't imagine that everybody's going to want to ring in the new year with the Golden Stallion. Maybe you do, and if you do, you can let me know, and maybe I'll change the date to then. Really what sets the date officially is the Patreon post about it, which I have not made yet. So you can still get in your thoughts as to when you'd like the December Patreon or live Q&A to be. So okay, but let's start getting into some questions. Got a few of them here that I want to try and get cleaned up. Let's finish things up for 2017. So we'll start this off with a tech question, bit of a fun one. What's your take on the idea of magnetic levitating roads that propel cars by levitating them, sort of like maglev trains? Okay, so maglev cars, maglev just is short for magnetic levitation. Maglev cars have been talked about for a long time. Obviously, the trains have as well. I've been on a maglev train, effectively. Like Disney has them. There's real world concepts of these that have been built and that are out there. And they are fascinating, and in fact, I think what excites a lot of people, especially today, is that you want to talk about green technology. It doesn't get any greener than maglev. It's like, that is zero emission. Holy shit. So, the idea of, and if it's such a great technology, and if it's such a practical, and it is such a practical technology that actually works, why aren't we driving maglev cars right now? Well, there's a couple different aspects to this. Okay. One is that, the infrastructure, like you would be replacing the roads pretty much, you would have to, it's so costly to redo our entire transportation, infrastructure, that's part of the reason I think that it hasn't really happened yet. One could get into the argument that, so with maglev, it could be, there's a couple points, a couple add-on points. It's possible to do completely solar-powered maglev cars. Like, maglev has an energy, an energy consumption ratio that actually would allow for where solar power would be kind of practical. However, flip side to that is that, like so many technologies, one of the reasons that a lot of a lot of different technologies that you can think of that people have thought about and planned, and everything can be solar powered, or everything can be this, and blah blah blah. A lot of these ideas, or like these parking lots that are solar collectors, all these brilliant technological innovations that you see and that somehow never come to fruition. A lot of times they don't come to fruition for one simple reason: snow. That's it, snow. You get into the Northeast or the Northwest of the United States, and these technologies become completely impractical at those points. Self-driving cars. Why aren't self-driving cars? Why aren't they here yesterday? Because they've been being worked on for so long, and it looked like Google's demos were so impressive even just a few years ago. Why aren't they already more or less taking over the roads? Blah blah blah. Again, snow. Winter weather, extreme weather conditions ruin a lot of this stuff. And look, I know some people hate the Northeast. I don't know why, but they do. Well, I mean, I do know why, but I love it. But anyway, look, the Northeast is a major, I mean, it's, New York City's a part of it. I mean, Bosnia-Wash, right? Boston, all that. It's a major center for everything, anything that comprises our modern world, economy, tech, the whole thing. So you have to appease, people that live in these areas. Okay. And so, yeah, that's nice. I mean, like all these, this is why I don't talk about a lot of these different innovations on Sovereign Tech, because great. Yeah, you could do that in San Francisco. Awesome. You could do that in California. Good for you. You could do it in Arizona. Fantastic. Have a good time. Okay. But when it talks about my hometown, that being New England, that being, the Northeastern United States, no, it's not practical for so many people in the United States. No, it'll never work because either they're too rural, they're way out in the country or something like that. And it requires a very tight knit, infrastructure for a technology to work or whatever. That it's not going to be a thing. Now, Maglev, that I don't see why that couldn't really work in the snow. So I mean, maybe there's something I don't understand about the technology as to why it couldn't, but it could. And there's a flip side to all this too. But one could get into the conspiracy theory, much like the death of the electric car, way, way back in like the 30s and whatever else, because the electric car isn't a new idea at all. One could get conspiratorial and say, well, big oil doesn't want to lose their stranglehold on things. And so, we're not, they don't want to have maglev cars. But then why are electric cars out there? Well, again, electric cars actually are really impractical, and they make balance sheets look good, like, I mean, I don't necessarily have a problem with the technology. I don't really have a problem with the abstract idea. I'm just saying the reason that they exist isn't because they're bestsellers or the world's clamoring for them. In fact, in many cases, quite the opposite. Okay. Because, you rely on oil, but in a grand scheme, or in a certain, how to say that, in a certain scheme, the internal combustion engine is a very independent technology. It doesn't, it needs the oil, but that's about all it needs. Otherwise, it's very self-integrated and everything. As for an electric car, well, I mean, it's not as independent technology for a bunch of reasons. I mean, repairability, a whole slew of other things, about it. So anyway, I'm kind of getting lost in the weeds here, but so maglev cars, I think it's a fine idea. I look forward to it. Certainly, it is one of those, there's, again, I'm going to get to the flip side, because there's actually a more exciting concept as far as maglev goes that intrigues me more. One of my major issues with the maglev car is the fact that you can't go off-roading with it, right? I mean, like, it's not like you can run off of the Earth's magnetic field or something. I mean, you have to be running off of, you have to have roads, that have, that are designed for this. So there is a bit of freedom lost, in my opinion, right? Like, you can't just pull over. I mean, like, there's a bunch of different, and look, I'm that kind of guy. Like, I like to pull off into the woods a bit, and maybe, get on the hood of a car with a gal and have the time, you know what I mean? And, get the stoop on. And I mean, so, and that's, look, I know I'm not alone in that, but I know that I'm kind of a rarity in that I'm always thinking about that sort of thing. But regardless, there are disadvantages to this. But in many ways, I think it's a great idea. And in fact, maybe that'll be the next step after autonomous cars are so, if things go the way that car companies and tech giants and the government wants things to go, if autonomous cars become the order of the day, the next leap in technology is really to turn those autonomous cars into maglev vehicles, because they're all going on predetermined tracks anyway. So then there's really no argument against it, because you're not driving the damn thing as is. Okay. Now, again, I'm not saying that that's necessarily the future I want. I can see where it would be a good idea. I think there's some interesting aspects to it. So I'm not necessarily not supportive of it, but then I'm also not super excited. Now, that said, there is, like I said, kind of a flip side to this. So one of the companies that would be very concerned, because they pretty much go out of business, or at least that's the theory, if maglev cars became a big deal, would be a company like Goodyear, right? The guys that make the tires. And Goodyear actually came up with a concept that I think is kind of brilliant, that uses maglev technology, believe it or not. So their idea is this: not that the roads, not how to put this, not that the roads would necessarily require new infrastructure. The roads would stay the same. Okay. What would actually end up happening is that your car would change to where your car had maglev wheels. And what I mean by that is that you would, the wheels, they'd be these spheroids, okay? You'd have these spherical wheels on your car, in the wheel well, okay? Totally spherical. Those wheels themselves would be propelled by a maglev generator that is in the car. Okay, you follow me? So instead of having to replace all the roads, all you're doing is you have to replace the car, which is still an expensive prospect. But you would still have all of that freedom. You'd still have all that ability, but you would take advantage of, in many ways, you take advantage of, the savings in energy, in consumption. And I don't know if you'd be able to get away from oil exactly, but you'd be able to take advantage of maglev technology. Just instead, the maglev would be the car, and it would be turning these spherical wheels, these I should say tires, these spherical tires. Okay, that are, just these giant metal balls, more or less. And that's a very interesting idea. That's clever, and that I think is obviously way more cost effective, because you could, you wouldn't have to replace all of that infrastructure. Also, you don't lose that freedom, because you could drive it off road. There's nothing really to stop you from doing that. So that's interesting, where the magnet would, the magnetic field would be holding, your car to these tires, and kind of away you go. Now, there's challenges around this, how does it work in a resting position and all of that, when the car stops, obviously that magnetic field isn't necessarily going to be going, or, well, the magnetism could still kind of hold it up, but there's challenges around that. The bottom line. So that's a direction I'm a little more interested in, is actually, not Maglev Roads so much, but Maglev tires. I think that's a direction that people kind of ignore, and brilliant on Goodyear's part. Obviously, they probably already patented the shit out of it, so that they can be the exclusive sellers of these incredible spherical tires or something, unfortunately. But, it's still a very interesting idea that I think they're working out a lot of bugs on, but that could be something coming in the future that I'd be excited about that, more so than Maglev Roads. But again, I don't necessarily have a problem in the abstract with, the idea of having Maglev roads and cars driving on that and everything. I mean, like an actual Maglev car could drive on the top of a pin. I mean, more or less. It's pretty incredible technology, just how well all of that works. So, I mean, and the turning ability, I mean, there's real advantages to having Maglev cars. Energy wise, driving wise, and etc. Of course, but again, you do lose some of that freedom, and then that's a problem. But I don't think you're going to be able to have them be fully solar powered like in the Northeast and things like that. So maybe there will be cities where they will test out maglev cars, kind of like that smart city that Bill Gates is, or his investment firm anyway, is a part of in Arizona. Like I could see that sort of thing happening there. And that's the importance of these sorts of things is, there needs to be geographic areas where you can at least test this stuff out on a grander scale. It can't just be in a lab, can't just be, on some parking lot. Like this stuff really needs to be tested on a grand scale. And I think we've got the wealth to do it. It's not, like humanity in general has the wealth to really pull that off, to give this stuff a shot, and see how it works. So yeah, I'm all for it, but you can imagine the challenges. Again, very expensive to replace, to like replace all of that infrastructure, and but it could be interesting if they do it. So anyway, next question. This is an interesting one. Do you believe the U.S. mainstream music scene in the 90s was more anti-censorship than it is now? If so, why do you think that momentum has died down? If not, why not? Okay, so I kind of have to read into your question a bit. I'm not exactly sure what you mean by anti-censorship, meaning like that they didn't care and they would say like, there'd be a lot of swear words in a song or something along those lines, or the lyrics would be, a little more serious, whatever. Was the 90s more anti-censorship than it is now? Yeah, I think so. I mean, to some degree today, you can get away with saying a lot more in a song than you could back then. But if the 90s was more anti-censorship, I don't know that it was any kind of attitude necessarily. Like, I don't know that musicians were just like, oh yeah, fight the power, or some kind of crap like that. I mean, certainly, you had a lot of rappers, you have Cop Killer, you've got a bunch of different stuff that they didn't seem to mind putting out there, like they were going for really extreme. One of the things that, I guess I would say that, yes, the 90s was more anti-censorship than now. And the reason I think that I would say that is you had the case that Tipper Gore, of all people, was really pushing against, where you got the parental advisory stickers on albums. Because, if I'm like a heavy metal, and that's pretty much who they were calling into, this like Senate hearing, more or less. They'd have various heavy metal singers there. Rob Halford would be there. Of course, Dee Snider of Rob Halford from Judas Priest, Dee Snider, of course, of Twisted Sister, who is a brilliant guy and like just hammered, this whole legal proceeding. And they put, at the end of it, because they were concerned about the messages being put out there in music throughout the 80s, which if there was really an anti-censorship time, it was the 80s. That's when boundaries were really being pushed, and it would culminate probably in, this would seem to be so tame. But I remember as a young person, this would have been 1992, Sophie B. Hawkins came out with a song called Damn, I Wish I Was Your Lover. And this got radio play, and there were no bleeps. I explicitly remember on radio never, ever hearing like a swear word of any kind up until that moment. When Sophie B. Hawkins, when that hit came out, damn, I wish I was your lover. I mean, like it's a good song, but it's obviously best known for the fact that she got away with saying damn, and it got played on the radio. And I remember my parents flipping out about it. They thought it was just insane that this was happening and everything. I think what's important to understand is like, so, that's, like I said, I think that's a natural outcropping of the 80s, where all this extreme kind of lyrical content and extreme visual content as well, from the musicians themselves was becoming a thing, music videos on MTV and all that crap. Okay. When the parental advisory stickers were being ordered to get put onto, albums and all that, and not just, at first they were stickers, then it ended up being like an actual label that would get printed on the book. That was, you got to understand, like when they put those parental advisories on those albums, that was pretty much a guaranteed way to sell another couple million of those albums. Because once kids saw, parental advisory, my parents aren't going to like this. Oh, I'll buy that album. I'll buy that new, Judas Priest album. I'll buy that new, Naughty by Nature album. Whatever. It was a guaranteed way to sell things. And the music industry knew. Like, they weren't stupid. They recognized, and they did, certainly at the time, they did a lot of, kind of man on the street, as it were, polling and whatever. It's not just bullshit algorithms collecting from Facebook. They really went out and, kind of did some guerrilla, polling, like I said, to where they're asking people, hey, why'd you get that album and whatever? And what albums were being bought? Certainly they knew that. And yeah, the parental advisory stuff, just sent albums through the roof. And so the music industry just took it to the next level, and they allowed for a lot of really extreme shit, even though you could argue that the parental advisory label was a form of censorship. It did the exact opposite, which is the nature of most government regulations, right? Is that it creates the exact opposite effect. So I think that if the music was anti-censorship in the 90s, it wasn't necessarily because the musicians were somehow more hardcore or something like that. That's it to some degree. Some people like Ice Cube and some others, yeah, sure, they've got a message, that they want to get out there, and they're going to make it fucking extreme, and they're going to do it right, But for a lot of them, I don't think it was necessarily that attitude. I think it was they knew that, breaking down this wall of what can be done in a song, said in a song and whatever, and it could be released without worry, because as long as they put that parental advisory label on it, the government couldn't really say anything, and they'd be, they'd legally be passing muster. Then, let's go all extreme, let's do it, and and sell millions and millions of albums in the process. So, yeah, if the 90s was more anti-censorship, I think it's because the music industry was behind it. Like, they were behind that message, saying, no, let's not censor it. Let's make this shit as extreme as we can, because kids are buying it right and left. And in the 80s, like I said, the 80s certainly was very anti-censorship as well, but the 80s had to, kind of hide everything. If you knew half of the popular songs, half the pop songs in the 80s, if you knew what they really meant, some people do, if you knew what they really meant, you'd be like, oh, what the fuck? And some of you, some of the people in my audience that are a bit older, that might have been growing up in the 80s, maybe you were 6 years old when, Cyndi Lauper's She Bop came out, right? She Bop is all about, masturbating. It's all about a woman masturbating. But, you had 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds. I remember, you had people running around singing that song. It's like, woohoo, or you had Rick Springfield's. He had Rick Springfield's, off of Working Class Dog, one of the biggest albums of all time. He has a song Inside Sylvia. And look, I know the age groups that were buying, Working Class Dog, and they were very young gals. And this song Inside Sylvia is all about Rick Springfield, being in a pussy. Which, but that song was a bit of a hit, and parents didn't know. They were just letting their kids, rock and roll with it. The song Sledgehammer, by Peter Gabriel. You go down the fucking list. A lot of these, it was all innuendo. What these songs actually meant. And in the 90s, they said, no more innuendo. We're just going to put it in your face. And now we have the legal badge that we can put on that can protect us, from that we can do it, but it protects us from any kind of litigation or any kind of, getting sued or reaction from the consumer, because no, we followed the letter to the law. We warned you. It says parental advisory on it. And if your kid, if little Johnny bought it, well, that's not our problem. That's yours. And so that really changed things up. Then you get into the aughts and all that. And now, now the music industry seems to have a real, the mainstream music industry, I feel like they have a direction they're trying to lead things in. When you get Katy Perry doing what are pretty much recruitment songs for the U.S. military, that's pretty disgusting. That's so bad. And which is a shame too, because I actually like some of Katy Perry's music. But now there's, now everything's very formulaic, and they know what they need to do. And the incentives are different too. So anti-censorship isn't necessarily part of the program anymore. Not in mainstream music. In non-mainstream music, of course, it's all over the fucking place. Fuck yeah, and good. But yeah, that's kind of my take on that. I hope I answered that question to satisfaction. But I don't believe for a second like that somehow Nirvana was this revolutionary band, or that, I know some people share like the lyrics that, that Kurt Cobain would write it, and the lyrics in Nirvana songs and all that. It's like, see, he's against the system, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, well, sorry, I don't know that many people, I know a lot of people that are really obsessed with Nirvana in the 90s. They're not anarchists right now. So the message was fucking lost. Get over it. Like, really get over it. Okay? As to where, by comparison, people that still listen to Motley Crue, that still listen to Kiss, that still listen to a bunch of this other stuff, I mean, the message is clear. Like, excess is best, sex is good, blah, blah, blah. And a lot of those people will still live up those, dare I say, I don't want to say principles, but they'll still live up that message. As to where Nirvana fans, I don't see Nirvana fans. I mean, there's some. I know there's a lot of, anarchists that are into, or not a lot, but I mean, I know there's quite a few anarchists that are into Nirvana or whatever else. But I don't see Kurt Cobain converting people. I didn't see him doing it in the 90s. I don't see it still happening now, where somehow they're converting people to be like these really anti-system activists or something. Like that's horseshit. That's just total horseshit. I'm glad you read something into it later on. I guarantee you it had nothing to do with you becoming an anarchist today, if you're an anarchist or a libertarian or something. I guarantee you. So anyway, me and Nirvana, it's an old it's an old battle. They ruined everything. So, okay, let's get on to, let's see. Here's a nice little science question. Then maybe we can get into a couple fun ones. This is good. We're getting through quite a bit here. Let's see. Do you have any issues with the Big Bang Theory or any other largely accepted mainstream astrophysics theory / model? Yeah, so I've talked about this quite a bit, so I don't want to spend a bunch more time on it, but I just do want to address it fast. Yeah, I don't think, like, I don't buy the theory of the Big Bang. I don't buy it at all. Now, if you're talking about the TV show, I also have lots of issues with the TV show, The Big Bang Theory. It's not praising nerds. It's nobody's laughing with those nerds. They're laughing at them, and it's insulting to when supposedly nerds have taken over. Not if you watch The Big Bang Theory. It appears that we're the laughing stock of society, and it's really annoying to me. But I think you're talking about the astrophysics model because that's what's later on in your question. So the Big Bang Theory, I don't buy it. It's, and I've had times in my life where I did. I'm much more accepting of it than the concept of a God, obviously, because there is no God. But yeah, I mean, and I don't get into, I know there's a lot of different astrophysical models that people want to, ride on. Like there's, the electric universe theory. There's a bunch of different ones. I tend towards what's called the quasi-steady state theory, which not the quasi, but the actual steady state theory used to be that was the theory du jour back before the 60s of how the universe came into being. Okay. But then the Big Bang Theory kind of took off from that, and seemed to fit the evidence a little bit better, and had a lot of support and whatever. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's right. Okay. There are huge problems with the Big Bang Theory. I mean, you have the Methuselah star, which defies the age of the universe, because according to the Big Bang Theory, the universe is 13.4 billion years old, something like that, around 13 billion years old. The Methuselah star, by our knowledge of physics, must be older than that. Like it's like 14 billion. Like it's a crazy number. And recently and in fact, we talked about this on Sovereign Tech. Recently, there had been some research that had actually kind of pared it down by a few point billion years, or so I guess a few million years, to where it seemed to fit in a little bit better with the timeline that the Big Bang Theory allows for the origin of the universe. I don't know, like that seems like you're trying to you're really trying to massage the facts quite a bit. So you have the Methuselah star is a problem. The uniform temperature of the universe is a problem, as to where if there's a single point of origin, of explosion, that or implosion, I suppose technically, that you should have the fringes of the universe that we can, look at or detect, get any signal from effectively, should be significantly colder, but they're not. It's all uniform. It's all the same. And that's where the quasi-steady state theory actually brings in a solution, because it says, well, there wasn't one big bang, there was a bunch of mini bangs. Okay. And this is, and this solves kind of the uniform temperature. And I agree. Like the idea of a bunch of mini bangs really does do that. So the quasi-steady state theory has been really interesting to me. There's a great author, and the guy who, pretty much anytime you're going to college for astrophysics, this is the guy that writes the, shall we say, the introductory book. Okay. And I mean that quite literally. Like he wrote, introduction to physics and to astrophysics. Jayant Narlikar, and he is one of the major proponents of the quasi-steady state theory. So, I dig that. Okay. I'm more inclined, but this is a theory that I think needs a lot more fleshing out, a lot more, math done on it. And, and there's a lot of very large questions that exist around it. But I bring this up often as well. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this. I'm just giving you like the cliff notes. Out of the University of Alberta, there was a research team that came up with the mathematical model that actually the universe never had a beginning. It's always been here and will always be here. It's a fascinating, I love it. It was like 2014, 2015, something like that, I think, when they first published their paper about it. And, I read it and I was just like, that's brilliant. Fuck yes. That's so, and that's so exciting. But my bias creeps in, right? Cause I'm a hedonist and, not necessarily an Epicurean, but, Epicurisoids always talked about how actually the universe has no beginning, which is, for a lot of people, you'd think, well, look, if that's what the science bears out, that's what it bears out. But for a lot of people, when you tell them the universe had no beginning, you know what the real problem for them is that means there was no creator. And that's why, like, Epicurus, the philosopher, the Greek philosopher, that's why he was, considered so anathema by so many religions, because he, in his own, he was an atomist, so, he liked to have things be based upon logic and reason, with a good, healthy dose of feeling, of course. And he pretty much made the point, and based upon his own theories and through his own provability, which you can debate or not, that no, the universe has no beginning. And also when you die, it's over. Two major things that almost any religion in the world would have a real fucking problem with, because that means there's no creator and there's no afterlife. Oh shit. We can't sell people on our two main points. And so religion is fucked if people believe in Epicureanism. It's an interesting, it's interesting to note that, like, in Judaism, when you are being called instead of being called like a heretic, or when you're getting excommunicated from Judaism, which doesn't happen often, but it happens, Baruch Spinoza and others, they call you an Epicurean because, you're committing the greatest sin. You're saying that there was no creation. You're saying that there is no afterlife. You're really fucking with the way that, these snake oil salesmen, are making their money. So I don't know if that theory is ever going to take off, but I applaud the research team at the University of Alberta for, having the guts to say that, because, a lot of people like to go a cheap road and say, well, the Big Bang Theory, that could have just been God. Even, like with the God particle, with the Higgs boson and all that stuff, they even say that, oh, well, the universe started with a collision of light and sound. Doesn't that sound like Genesis 1:1, where it says, and God said, let there be light. Well, he said, so there's sound and then there's light, and it's light. And so, like, the Big Bang Theory is actually very palatable to a lot of Christians. And I think it fits in with a lot of, religious Jews as well. And, as to where I'm not really willing to give that kind of quarter, to to say that. And yeah, so I think it takes a lot of guts today to come out with a mathematical theory, to put your reputation as a scientist on the line, saying, guess what? There's a chance, there's the mathematical probability that the universe has always been here. But my bias leans towards that. I like that idea. Like I can admit it to myself that I buy into it partly because I like it, much like a lot of religious people buy into things, not because they're logical, but because even though this is logical, it's mathematically provable. But, a lot of people buy into things just because it fits their aesthetic. It fits their taste, So, yeah, I mean, and there's a lot of other theories too, like that I haven't like completely written off for myself. In fact, another origin theory is that this universe actually exists in like the corona of I know this is going to sound nuts, but in like a multi-dimensional black hole. In fact, that theory, I was very amazed to hear it. I mean, it was like in one sentence, but in the new series of Cosmos that was done with Neil deGrasse Tyson, he actually mentioned it, that maybe that's what it is. So I got to give credit to Cosmos for at least being willing to entertain some other, astrological models to how the universe came into being, how our universe came into being. Also, like there's theories like with gravity, a very popular theory in the 90s with gravity was that gravity actually, where gravity really comes from, not that it's dark matter, and also dark matter, I don't buy it. I don't. The evidence is very ugly with that, and I'm not the only. Actually, I've heard some other people in recent years also speak out against that, and there's been research that dark matter feels like it's trying to solve, it's just this random element that people want to toss in to try and explain a problem that they have in their astrophysical theories. Okay. So I have a real problem with dark matter. Like Steve Gibson of Security Now, he's talked about it too. They've talked about it briefly on the show, saying, yeah, this dark matter thing's falling apart because this isn't good science. Like, what the fuck are they doing? And I agree with that. I still am intrigued by the theory that, gravity, which this was popular in the 90s, that gravity, where it comes from and how to explain it is it actually leaks from another dimension. Now, you have to accept M theory, or what maybe people more popularly consider superstring theory. You have to accept that, the idea that there are like all these other dimensions and everything, to really like let that fly. And M theory is still up to heavy debate, amazingly, even though in the early aughts and the late 90s, this was, fast becoming pretty much accepted science. But now I guess there's a little more debate to it, in recent years. But anyway, it's something I'd love to do. I'd be intrigued. So I am not far, I live in the kind of the Dartmouth area, and I would be intrigued to go to some of the, more higher end science talks that are had there that have to do with physics and astrophysics, etc. And just kind of like get the pulse of where a lot of these people are at, because you can't get it online. Like phys.org, everybody wants to go to phys.org. That site's bullshit. Not that it's lying to you, but they have to come up with like 5-6 news stories a day at least. Often they do a lot more. And look, there isn't that many shit. There isn't that much shit coming out in the science world to even report on. So they're just like reporting on shit that may tomorrow could be completely debunked, or that'll never be like practical and never has any actual meaning to you, the everyday person, which supposedly that site is all about sharing, all these like everyday kind of science stories with you. So yeah, you've really got it. You got to be in there with the people that are really doing it. And maybe some point I'll get to doing that. So anyway, yeah, no, there's a lot of, there's models I accept. There's models that I don't. And I've talked about them a few times. I've had a couple people ask even recently, like about the electric universe and all that. I'm willing to look into it. I am not sold yet, on that. There are other theories that fit that solve a lot of the problems that the Big Bang Theory represents, some of which we described here. There was one episode, I did a whole segment. I'd have to look up the episode. I did a whole segment where I talked about like the 5 or 6 major problems with the Big Bang Theory. And I explained why they're problems, and pretty much the quasi-steady state theory actually, resolved every one of them. But that episode was a while back. In fact, I remember that episode particularly, there was a problem with the audio where the audio was really ugly. But that was some time ago. Anyway, so okay, let's we're doing so good. I don't want to get lost on all of that. Let's get in. How about this? Let's get into a couple of fun questions because I have two fun ones here. So here we go, two fun ones to wrap all this up. Let's see. Did you have a favorite Catwoman on the campy, this was asked on Twitter, on the campy 66 Batman TV series? If so, who was she and why is she your favorite? Ooh, nice. You better believe I moved. This was just asked a couple days ago. I moved this way up the list because I man, if someone's asking me to talk about the 66 Batman, you better believe I'm going to do it. The 66 Batman TV series. Okay, so I've talked about this many times. Of course, unfortunately, we lost Adam West this year. Really there's been so many. Lemmy, Bowie, Prince, Carrie Fisher, Adam West. Those have probably been the ones that have hit me the hardest over like that string of celebrity deaths that seemed to happen for a little while there. George Michael, sucked too, but definitely Adam West was a big one, particularly since he really wasn't done. In fact, he was kind of getting a resurgence with these, with the new the animated 66 Batman movies, which have both been very well received, very critically acclaimed, and very popular and have sold well. So I loved them. I reviewed both of them on Sovereign Tech. I thought they were fantastic. I love the 66 Batman TV series. I mean, it's just, that's my, Adam West is my Batman. That's my Batman. In fact, Collider the other day, I think they ranked it at like number 17, 18 or 17, something like that. They were talking about the 89 Batman, which a lot of people, and they mentioned it when they were reviewing it on their show. They're doing like this top 50 superhero movies countdown, which some of which I agree with them on, some of which I think they're a little crazy. But then that's the purpose of top 10 or top 50 lists, is it's to get people talking and arguing, or at least that's why most people do them. I don't do them for that reason. So I'm literally telling you what I think. I'm not giving you something to argue about, or at least I'm not intending to. But anyway, they were talking about the 89 Batman, and a lot of them said the same thing that I felt when I was, like 8 years old. I wanted to see that movie because I loved the 66 Batman. A lot of people went to go see that movie, the 89 Batman movie, which I think is, really, as far as if I were to rank it as far as comic book movies go, totally belongs in the top 10. Like just for what it did, between that and, the 78 Superman. I mean, that they were the they were the ones that allowed comic book movies to be legit and serious. I mean, and then after Batman, really X-Men was the next, that's kind of like the trio that allowed for comic book movies to be what they are today, to be the juggernaut that they are today. So anyway, but a lot of people, the Batman 66 series, I mean, people love that for a long time. That's 20 years later, that people are still like, oh yeah, I want to go see this 89 Batman movie because, nobody knew Tim Burton really at the time. Michael Keaton was a draw, so was Jack Nicholson, but people were seeing this because 66 Batman. All right, let's do this, which was in heavy syndication at the time. So I grew up with the 66 Batman series. I gladly admit that, and that can be part of my bias for it. But I think genuinely, you look back on it now, it still holds up. You can tell it's from the 60s, but because it's the theater of the absurd, it's so, it's so ridiculous. It just, it fits into any time that you put it. And certainly one of the timeless aspects of that show is Catwoman. Definitely Michelle Pfeiffer in Batman Returns, really put Catwoman in the popular consciousness. But like the idea of her, wearing that skin tight suit, the whole thing, and the little cat mask and whatever, the Batman 66 series really pioneered that, and it was able to pioneer it with 3 just brilliant and beautiful women. And I mean that. Like, don't let their don't let the mentality, get ignored over just how great Julie Newmar, Lee Merriweather, and Eartha Kitt looked in those outfits. Because Julie Newmar is a brilliant, just a brilliant woman. Eartha Kitt who, well, we'll talk a bit more about her in a second, but also, at one point by many celebrities was considered the most interesting, the most fascinating woman alive. I mean, she was something else. And I mean, well, anyway, Lee Merriweather, fantastic. Okay. So, my favorite of the three. Now, Lee Merriweather only played Catwoman, if I remember correctly, only played her in the Batman 66 movie, which is probably the thing of Batman 66 I've watched the most. Like, I've watched that movie over and over and over again. It is such a solid film. Okay. And she was tremendous in it, either playing the Russian, her alter ego of Kitka, or, I mean, she was just sexy as hell. I mean, and she just looked phenomenal, and she played it to the hilt. Or as Catwoman herself, like, I mean, it was all very believable. I mean, she really delivered. Lee Merriweather, most people I don't even think they necessarily realize that there was a difference, that there was Lee Merriweather and there was Julie Newmar, that they were actually two different Catwomen. Eartha Kitt, who's black, you can't not know, right? So some people don't even know that there was three, that they just think that there was actually two. Julie Newmar played Catwoman throughout the first two seasons of the Batman 66 TV series, which ended up going 3 seasons. In the third season, we ended up with, like I said, a black Catwoman. We ended up with Eartha Kitt. So, Julie Newmar is, I mean, she just goes without saying, she's one of the sexiest, frankly, and like I said, don't take away from their brilliance, but she's one of the sexiest women to ever, grace Hollywood. Quite frankly, I mean, she's just stunning. Like every move she makes, everything she does is just pure sex appeal. I mean, she's remarkable. She still voices, in fact, in the two movies I mentioned earlier, the 2 animated films that have come out over the past 2 years for the Batman 66 series. She is voicing. I mean, and granted, you can tell that she's old, okay, but she's still voicing she's voicing Catwoman in those films, which I think is great that they were able to bring her back. And I don't mind if she sounds old. Go ahead. It's Julie Newmar. That's enough. That is all the clout in the world that you need. So now then you end up in season 3. I mean, and she did a phenomenal job. Like she may be the most well-known Catwoman, is that it was Julie Newmar, and rightfully so. I mean, she looks fantastic. She delivers on, like, she's, the purr, the whole thing. She just does it all. She's a natural fit for the outfit and for the character itself. Eartha Kitt in season 3, I have to give, and I'd love to know more of the history around this someday, but I have to give the producers, everybody involved with the Batman 66 show, so much credit for having the guts to have, a major love interest of Batman be a black woman. Because at the time in the 60s, understand, this is the same time as, Plato's Stepchildren with Star Trek, the original series, where, it was the first interracial kiss and all that. Like, look, people had problems with this in the 60s, okay? So I have to give them credit for saying, no, you know what? That's fine. She's black. And she's in love with Batman. We're going to make that happen. We're going to roll with this. That's tremendous. And to give the character, like, I don't know, to give such a popular character, I mean, you got to understand the context of the times. Like, that was a huge deal, and I can't give them enough credit for it. And Eartha Kitt was so sexy. Was she hot? I agree that when you have all these celebrities at the time saying, "Look, this is the most interesting woman on the planet." I mean, like, fuck yeah, she was. Oh man. And she could do it all. Like, I mean, multi-talent. I mean, a lot of people in Hollywood at the time, you had to be everything. You had to be a model, had to be a dancer, had to be a singer, had to be an actor. You had to have all these different talents back then in Hollywood, as to where now you can be in Hollywood just for breathing. Eartha Kitt could do it all. I mean, wow, and she died, 2008, I think she had died. But this is a woman who was, like, who gave anti-war speeches, Eartha Kitt, at the White House. I mean, she got banned from the White House after doing it, but I'm sure she didn't fucking mind. She'd probably like paint the White House black, baby. You know? Oh, what a woman. Whew. So it's tough. You know, I don't necessarily want to choose, you know, who's my favorite Catwoman based upon, you know, what they did outside of being Catwoman. If that were the metric, you know, if that was included, Eartha Kitt would win in a heartbeat. You know, she just would. In fact, Eartha Kitt might still kind of win in my mind. This is such a tough choice. I mean, this is so hard. A part of me just wants to say Lee Merriweather, just because that like her depiction and that scenario that she existed within as Catwoman is in many ways to me like the essential Catwoman. But Julie Newmar is just so much. I think I've got to give it to Eartha Kitt, you know. Even so, I mean, season 3 is when the show started to, you know, kind of wane, but her, no pun intended, but her coming in, you know, as Catwoman, like, I think she raised the bar on how hot that show could be so much and made it a little more blatant, you know. And I'm not taking I'm not taking away anything away from Lee Merriweather. I'm not taking anything away from, I'm sure as fuck not taking anything away from Julie Newmar, you know. I mean, oh man, it's such a toss up like that. This is one of the most difficult choices. Like, and I'm sure I've said in the past that Julie Newmar was my favorite, and at the time I felt it. I'm going to say right now, I'm going to say Eartha Kitt. Like, I'm going to give it to her. I thought that she was tremendous, and I've heard like backstage stories where she, well, again, that's bringing in things that, well, you know, that don't necessarily have to do with Catwoman, but I thought her depiction really took Catwoman to the next level. And you know, it's funny when a lot of people give, like there was that standalone movie. When did that come out? 2001, 2002, something like that, of Catwoman with Halle Berry as Catwoman. So many people gave her credit. Wait, why is Catwoman black? Why does she have this? Why, you know, why did she even have the short hair? I don't recall exactly, but look, Eartha Kitt did all that, you know, 30, 40 years beforehand. What are you complaining about? There's nothing wrong with it. I mean, the movie sucked. The movie Catwoman really sucked. And part of its problem more was that, like, Catwoman, if I remember right, she had like actual superpowers, which that robs something from the character, in my opinion. But yeah, I just, anyway, Catwoman in the 66 Batman series, you know, really set the template. And I think that Eartha Kitt as Catwoman was such a risky thing, and I think she really took it to the next level. It's tough. It's so hard for me to say, but if I'm going to give Eartha Kitt just the edge out on that. I really, really liked her portrayal. So, okay, we're at the 52-minute mark, so maybe we can get into one more question here. So yeah, this is one actually I wanted to, it's been on my sheet for a while. Hey, Stallion, you have convinced me to get into PC gaming, but I've been away from it for quite a few years. What store do you recommend, and what game do you recommend? I've heard you talk a lot about TIE Fighter. So, okay. Yeah. Yes, I talk about TIE Fighter a lot. Really cool that you want to get into PC gaming. I know we have some pretty cool things. Or there's an event. If you're in the Sovereign Tech Uncensored Facebook group, I think we're planning on doing like not TIE Fighter, but X-Wing versus TIE, X-Wing Alliance, whatever the game is. The event's listed in there, and because all these games kind of like start melding together on you. And so, you know, that's something like getting into some multiplayer gaming with patrons and you know, other people and Sovereign Tech listeners and whatever, like that would be something I'd love to do. That'd be a lot of fun. 2017 has been a year where I have had like practically no time, and so many things have been delayed because of that lack of, you know, that my schedule being so full this year. So 2018, hopefully I want to change all of that. And, you know, really, really get re-engaged, get a lot of projects, you know, finally released and get re-engaged with everything. So anyway, yeah, so with PC gaming, if you haven't been around for a few years, I don't know what a few years means, but like what I recommend is, me personally, and we'll talk about TIE Fighter as well. I recommend actually playing the classics, like getting reacquainted with gaming And then, because if you just pick up, what's a good example? Like, so maybe you'll recognize, especially if you were a past PC gamer, you might recognize like the Homeworld games, which were really, really popular, and rightfully so. There is a new like real-time strategy game, Battle of Karath or whatever that it's called, that came out for the Homeworld series. It's not a whole lot like, the classic Homeworld games, but B, it has a lot more modern like real-time strategy stylings to it, and that's the thing, is games have very much evolved. Like I mean they're a lot more complex than they ever really were. Even though I think on the other side of that, like if you play like classic games, like even old NES games or old PC games, like really old, we're talking like early 90s, stuff like this, because of it's so amazing to go back to some of those things, because like the graphics were so basic. I don't want to say poor, because they're serviceable, and at the time they were high end, right? So calling them poor, I think is if you're using modern equipment and something ends up looking bad, as in like say you're making a movie and you're using modern CGI tools and the CGI looks rough, then sure, that's poor graphics, right? But that's a lot different than saying basic graphics, which isn't an insult. Basic just means that, it was a simpler time. So like when you play some of those classic games, I mean, they can be harder. And also, like, a lot of them used to rely on a ton of keyboard commands, that you would input, or even just some very simple commands from the DOS days, that didn't translate to today. Or at least not directly. So like, even if you played some modern games, going back and playing some of the classics, admittedly, that can be tough too. But I think it's just a way better experience to play some of the classic PC games and then start building back up to something more modern, so that you can see how all of this stuff has evolved. I talk about this, a lot. Like, as far as where a lot of my perspective and thoughts come from, and a lot of my technical knowledge and everything, a lot of it really just came from not necessarily, schooling, though I've had that, but it came from just, I was born at the right time. I was born when these technologies were at their formative stages. And so I know what they were like. I know their base level. And now, years later, I can remember how it all started, and I can remember all these classic commands and everything that still hold today. And, and I can remember how things were, and that gives me a lot of perspective on how things are today. So I think starting it to some degree in the beginning, not too far in the beginning, you don't have to go way back and play Commodore 64 games or anything. Not that there's anything wrong with them, but you don't have to go way back. But yeah, I think playing some of the classics is a really solid foundation to build up if you want to get into playing more modern stuff as well. Because again, there really has been a very real evolution, even though right now there's definitely a retro gaming over the past 3-4 years. There's really been a retro gaming resurgence where like these even the classic graphics have all kind of come back, and the classic ways of playing have come back, which I am totally supportive of. I think that's great. So anyway, a great game to start off with. Well, if you've played flight simulators before, and that's really that's the rub here. Okay, is that you had to have played flight simulators before. TIE Fighter is, well, it's the greatest game of all time. I mean, that's just how it is, and I don't think there's necessarily an argument around that. So this came out in 94. You asked what store to go through. Go through GOG.com, GOG.com, and they actually, lucky for you, they happen to sell a lot of the classic computer games from like the 90s and even before that, and from the aughts, the early aughts and everything. So GOG.com is where I would go, and there's a lot of advantages to that because you can actually have control of the download files and everything. So when you have the game, you have the game. It's not like you have to rely on someone else's servers if you don't want to, to store the game for you. So GOG, it's GOG.com. That's what you want to hit up. And you can buy TIE Fighter on there. And GOG is really great because they make all the emulation. I mean, they do all the updating. They make sure everything works on modern operating systems. I mean, it's just a tremendous service. And it's all DRM free, which I think is fairly ethical of them, quite frankly. So, but you can buy TIE Fighter on there. I think they even have like a Christmas sale of some kind going on right now. And this game, you know, so you can download PDFs of the manual and everything. You're definitely going to want to do that because this game has quite a few keyboard commands that you're going to want to get to know. Now, when you're in game, you can also press escape and whatever to be able to, to see what all those commands are. But it's helpful if you have a little PDF and maybe you could put it on your phone and just have your phone next to you so that you can reference the commands quick. But it's one of those games that, in my opinion, it really is easy to pick up and difficult to master. You know, that old saying. And it's totally true with this. I think it lends itself to a very self-explanatory navigation, meaning that getting around the game and everything, I feel like is very self-explanatory. So I don't think it's complex in that way. There's training simulators that you can get into with the game if you want to get great at it before you really start taking on missions. I mean, this is such a TIE Fighter is such a beautiful, complete world of a game. Forget about the fact that it's even Star Wars. I mean, certainly the fact that that it's Star Wars and it has a Star Wars storyline and it has the Empire and the dark side and all that in it. Certainly, all of that really adds to its appeal. But it is a genuinely just straight up great game. Strip all of those stylings away from it, you still have a phenomenal flight sim on your hands, which are rare today. Flight sims are very rare. Now, as far as how to play it, so normally you would, joysticks, PC joysticks, as in like, an actual stick like a flight stick, used to be very commonplace in the 90s. They still sell them. You can get a great one for like $30-$40, from Thruster Master or Logitech or something. Okay. You could spend hundreds if you want, but you can get good ones for a lower price. Or you can, I've come to really love playing TIE Fighter with an Xbox One controller. Like, I've really come to love playing it with that. Yeah, the joystick is awesome. There's nothing, or the flight stick is awesome, I should say. Not going to take anything away from that, but I've really come to love playing with an Xbox One controller, which I got used to playing. So, like, the last major flight sims outside of, say, Free Space that I ever really played were all on PlayStation. You had the Colony Wars trilogy, which are some of the greatest games ever made. You have, and they're only on PlayStation 1. It's so crazy, that they haven't had like a major re-release or anything like that. Maybe you can get them through the PlayStation Network or something. I don't know. But anyway, you have the Colony Wars games. You had Starfighter, which Starfighter you can get on Star Wars Starfighter. You can get on PC. I love that game where you get to fly in an N1 Naboo Starfighter. And then there was Jedi Starfighter for PlayStation 2. That between that and then there was Star Trek Invasion, Star Trek Shattered Empire. There's the Battlestar Galactica flight sim for PlayStation 2, which, holy shit, this game, it came out like in 2004, so it sort of takes place in its own continuity, but actually Richard Hatch and Dirk Benedict do voiceovers in the game at certain points, which is just so cool. That totally hooked me on buying it. But my point being is that the last real flight simulators, serious flight simulators that had like depth and meaning and story to them and all that I ever played were on PlayStation. Were on PlayStation or PlayStation 2. And so because of that, I've actually gotten very used to playing flight sims with a controller, with either a PlayStation controller or in this case it would be an Xbox One controller, which, they're not terribly different in the abstract. So you can really get away with playing using an Xbox One controller if you want to do that. But TIE Fighter, understand, you are, like I said, you are delving into an entire world. This game will consume you. It'll absolutely consume you. I've cracked the joke that PCs are really just, we should just call them TIE Fighter boxes, because that's really all they do is they, like the personal computer has not advanced beyond the fact that it plays TIE Fighter. like that's the ultimate evolution of what a computer can do. I mean, TIE Fighter is that fucking great. It's I think Disney's leaving money on the table. If they sold that, if they did like a full HD remaster of some kind of TIE Fighter, it would sell like hotcakes because the game still holds up. I still play it. I play it all the time. Hell, my bio on all of my or on most of my whatever accounts, social media accounts, or whatever else. That's all I put, TIE Fighter pilot, because that's what I do for kicks. It's such an amazing game, and like the story in it will really take in all the things. Like TIE Fighter came up with the idea of achievements, like getting badges and even like these dark side tattoos, because there's a storyline where you can work for these like secret dark side prophets for the Emperor and everything, and you could become there's different like the Emperor's Hand. I think there's a bunch of different ranks that you can get within the game. They had the idea of achievements back in 94. This game is so ahead of its time. That's why it still plays so brilliantly, so beautifully, and you can play it on almost any hardware. Like there's barely a computer you could buy today. In fact, I can't believe there is a computer out there that you could buy that couldn't run this game. It's that solid. Now you can even play it on Linux now. I think with GOG they have Linux compatibility for it, and what a dream. In many ways, it's the only game you ever need to play. There's others in the series. You have its prequel, which is X-Wing. Then you have a couple of sequels, X-Wing versus TIE Fighter, which you don't really play. That's more multiplayer. But then you had X-Wing Alliance, which is a solid game. It's not as engaging for a variety of reasons, I think, but it's not as engaging as TIE Fighter. TIE Fighter is still that golden crown. But yeah, you could rock those too. So, but flight simulators are such a rare style of game. If you wanted to play something outside of flight simulators, I don't know, you could start off with, oh man, there's so many games to choose from as far as what's, you can even do a platformer like Jazz Jackrabbit or something. I don't know. There's a lot of options out there. Okay. And there's tons of free games too, like you can get free versions of like Super Dune 2 if you want to play some classic, real-time strategy action that I think is tremendous. You can get all the Command and Conquer games, which those are totally worthwhile. StarCraft you can play totally for free now if you want to get back into that. There's plenty of free options available as well. But yeah, boy, if you want to rock out some TIE Fighter, this game just has again, it has story. The gameplay is perfect. Everything feels intuitive. You have what are effectively achievements before there were achievements. It's a total package, and like I said, you can just get lost in it. And they even, like in the guidebooks that you download for that come with the game when you buy it on GOG, like in the guidebooks, there's a whole story behind like what's going on. There's what's his name, Merrick Steele or whatever is the name of the pilot supposedly that you're flying, but you can put in whatever name you want. That's the other nice thing too, is like right at the beginning you put in your name, it says put in your name, pilot, and you instantly feel like, okay, this is me. I'm going to train in a TIE Fighter, and Daddy's going to go kick some ass, and it's so cool. I really wish they would just do an HD remaster of it. But it doesn't even need that. It still plays so solidly today. And you just, like I said, you just get lost in it. You get so consumed in it because there's so much to do. Like there's briefing rooms to look at where you can look at all like the technical specifications of all the different rebel ships you're going after, everything that you've encountered. There's side missions to go on. It's open. It's the first game that I can really remember, more so even than X-Wing. It's the first game where you felt like, wow, this is an entire galaxy that I'm going in. And it is endless. Like there's no borders to where you can go with it. So, and I think the Imperial, the fact that you were kind of the bad guy, like that was such a new aspect to it. It doesn't hurt that it opens up with Thrawn talking either. But, like that, having that Imperial aspect was so unique. Like to finally be the bad guy, I think that sold a lot of people. It's like, wait a minute, what is it like to be the bad guy? Because games generally didn't do that other than like maybe Wario, in the Super Mario series. Like that just generally didn't happen. And there'd be some other games like Dungeon Keeper or Evil Genius and some other ones that would come out for PC eventually. But that was such a rare thing. I think that hooked people too. And it's pretty cool. And when you get to the TIE Defender, holy shit, it's pretty fucking awesome. So anyway, all right, that's it. We're going well over an hour here. So those are what I recommend. GOG.com. Go ahead and pick up TIE Fighter. And like I said, you can easily play it with an Xbox controller on your PC. But, if you want, you can get a full flight stick and everything, and go to town on it. And I give you some other options to look into as well. I don't think you can get the Command and Conquer games on GOG, but there's just a slew of options. You'll probably, if you were a gamer in the past, you're going to recognize a lot of the names, and just start with some of those, and you can get them really cheap. So, okay, that's it. Of course, we'll be finishing up for December. We will be finishing up the reading from STFU, the Permanent Autonomous Zone. That'll finish up over the next week or so, and we've got got a Relationship Rhombus show to come out. Like I said, we've got the I think was it the 29th that I said that we will do the Hangouts live Q&A. You got a Star Wars update coming. You also have a Star Trek update coming up. I mean, just tons of content coming out for patrons. Thank you so much to all those who are patrons. Thank you for that increase their patronage, and those that have been around for so long. Thank you. So anyway, I will see you. And oh baby, I've got a doozy of a Sovereign Tech coming up this week too. But I will see you on the other side. Woo!